Imagine living inside a city protected by walls. No enemy has broken for generations. Behind them are soldiers, crowded markets, temples, warehouses, and thousands of people who believe stone, wealth, and numbers have made them safe. Then riders appear on the horizon. They come from a land without great cities or towering fortresses. Yet within a few years, kingdoms fall, cities burn. Empires that survived for centuries suddenly collapse. It feels as if the world itself is breaking apart. But after the armies pass, something unexpected remains. The same routes once used by Mongol warriors begin carrying merchants, engineers, diplomats, religions, technologies, ideas, and eventually diseases across continents. How could one of history's most feared conquerors help lay the foundations for one of the most connected worlds of his age? This is the story of Genghis Khan. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to English Mindwave. Long before Mongol armies reached the walls of wealthy cities, the steppe itself was divided. There was no single Mongol nation. There were tribes, clans, rival leaders, temporary alliances, and old grievances that could survive for generations. Families competed for grazing land, animals, marriage alliances, and protection. A promise made in spring could disappear before winter. Power was never completely secure. A leader could gather followers one year and lose them the next. A friend could become an enemy. A family with status could suddenly find itself alone. Inside this unstable world lived a boy named Temüjin. He was not born with an empire waiting for him. He was born into the same broken system that trapped everyone else. When his father died, the followers who had once depended on the family abandoned them. Their protection vanished almost overnight. Temüjin, his mother, and his siblings were left with little food and almost no security. They survived by gathering roots, catching fish, and hunting small animals. But hunger was not the deepest lesson. The deeper lesson was that status could disappear in a single day. A respected family name meant little when no one was willing to defend it. Blood could create loyalty, but it could also create rivalry. Even inside the family, fear and scarcity caused conflict. Later, enemies captured Temüjin and placed him in a heavy wooden collar. His escape became possible only because another person chose to help him. That moment revealed something important. Strength had not saved him. His father's reputation had not saved him. One person's loyalty had. As Temüjin grew older, he married Börte. Their marriage gave him an important alliance, and perhaps, for a short time, the hope of building a more stable life. Then Börte was taken by the Merkit, a rival group seeking revenge for an older conflict involving Temüjin's family. Temüjin could not rescue her alone. He turned to Togrul, a powerful leader connected to his father, and to Jamuka, the man he had once called his Anda, his sworn brother. Together, their forces attacked the Merkit and brought Börte back. The rescue was deeply personal, but it also taught Temüjin something larger. Courage was not enough without allies. Survival was temporary without organization, and loyalty, if carefully built, could become a form of power. Temüjin had spent his early life watching protection disappear. Now he began learning how protection could be created, not by standing above everyone alone, but by giving different people a reason to move together. The most important person who moved beside him would eventually become the man he had to defeat. Jamuka was more than an ally. He was Temüjin's sworn brother, tied to him by promises meant to survive hardship, distance, and war. They had grown up beneath the same endless sky. They understood ambition, danger, and the cost of appearing weak. For a time, it seemed possible that they might rise together. But they did not imagine the future in the same way. Jamuka stood closer to the traditional aristocratic order of the steppe. Noble birth, inherited rank, and tribal hierarchy mattered deeply in that world. Temüjin did not reject hierarchy. The system he created would become strict and centered firmly on his authority. But he was more willing to break old tribal divisions. He accepted followers from different backgrounds. He promoted men who proved useful and loyal, even when they did not come from the highest families. He reorganized warriors into military units that weakened their older tribal ties. A warrior was no longer only a member of one clan. He was becoming part of something larger. This was not equality in the modern sense. Temüjin was not trying to create a free society. He was building a stronger and more disciplined order under his own command. But to many people living beneath powerful nobles, his camp offered something unusual. Service could matter almost as much as birth. Slowly, friendship became competition. Then competition became a struggle over the future of the steppe. Their conflict was powerful because each man understood the other. Jamuka knew Temüjin's past, his weaknesses, and his ambition. Temüjin knew that defeating Jamuka would mean destroying a bond that had once seemed permanent. But there was no longer room for two futures. Jamuka sought power within the old order. Temüjin was beginning to dismantle that order and replace it with something new. After years of shifting alliances, defeats, returns, and difficult choices, Jamuka lost. Temüjin absorbed more tribes, reorganized more warriors, and made loyalty to his command stronger than many older loyalties. In 1206, the assembled leaders recognized him by a new title, Genghis Khan. He had united the Mongol tribes, but he had also created something the steppe had never seen before, a disciplined military system built from former enemies. And that system would not remain on the grasslands for long. When the Mongol armies began moving outward, other kingdoms discovered that their power did not come from one secret weapon. It came from many advantages working together. The first was speed. Mongol warriors often traveled with several horses, changing mounts during long journeys. They could cover distances that seemed impossible to slower armies. They could appear where an enemy did not expect them, vanish, and return from another direction. But their movement was not uncontrolled. Speed was supported by discipline. Units followed clear orders. Commanders could divide armies across enormous spaces and bring them together again at the right moment. A retreat might be real, or it might be a trap designed to pull defenders away from safety. What looked like chaos from the outside was often carefully planned. Information made the system even more effective. Scouts rode ahead, merchants carried news, prisoners and local guides revealed roads, defenses, supplies, and political rivalries. The Mongols studied more than armies. They studied fear. They studied mistrust. They studied the weaknesses hidden inside powerful states. A kingdom might possess great walls and thousands of soldiers, but if its leaders distrusted one another, those walls could become a prison. Still, speed and intelligence were not enough to conquer fortified cities. The Mongols had grown up without stone walls, but they did not reject the knowledge of settled civilizations. They absorbed it. Engineers from China and Central Asia helped build siege weapons. Translators opened negotiations and revealed information. Administrators helped govern conquered lands. Craftsmen and specialists were moved wherever their skills were most useful. Every victory taught the Mongol system something new. That may have been its most dangerous strength. It did not remain the same army after every conquest. It became more capable. Fear also moved ahead of it. Cities that resisted could face devastating punishment, and stories of destruction often reached neighboring regions before the Mongol riders did. Some rulers surrendered because they believed resistance would bring an even worse result. For the Mongols, fear could shorten a campaign. For civilians, it could bring terrible loss. Campaigns against Western Shah and the Jin dynasty taught the Mongols how to fight fortified states and adapt to long wars. Then came the conflict with the Khwarezmian Empire. What began with the killing of merchants and envoys became one of the most destructive campaigns of Genghis Khan's life. Mongol armies crossed enormous distances. Cities fell, resistance was crushed. A powerful empire collapsed with shocking speed. But the Mongols were not winning simply because they were more violent than everyone else. They were winning because speed, information, discipline, adaptation, and fear worked together. The same system could operate in deserts, mountains, grasslands, and around walled cities. And hidden inside that military system was the beginning of something even larger. Armies needed messengers. Messengers needed horses, routes, and safe passage. Commanders needed information. Conquered territories needed translators, officials, engineers, and specialists. The Mongols had built a system capable of moving soldiers across continents. Soon, that system would begin moving far more than soldiers. Under Genghis Khan's successors, the routes across Eurasia became part of a wider network. Messages traveled through relay stations. Merchants crossed regions once divided by rival states. Diplomats entered distant courts. Artisans, doctors, engineers, scholars, and religious teachers moved between cultures that had rarely met so directly before. Chinese knowledge traveled west. Persian and Central Asian ideas moved east. Technologies, artistic styles, medical practices, and methods of government reached new places. The empire did not erase distance, but it changed what distance meant. Still, this connected world was never simple. It had been built through conquest. Many people traveled because they were ordered to move, not because they were free. Cities had been damaged. Families had been displaced. Entire communities remembered the Mongols not as creators of connection, but as the force that shattered the world they knew. Connection did not erase that suffering. It existed beside it. And the same roads that carried knowledge could also carry danger. A century later, long-distance networks across Eurasia would help disease travel with terrifying speed. The Black Death revealed the darker side of connection. When distance becomes smaller, opportunity moves faster, but so does disaster. Genghis Khan did not live to see this connected world fully develop. He died in 1227 during a campaign against Western Xia. The exact circumstances remain uncertain, and his burial place has never been conclusively identified. A man whose armies crossed continents disappeared into a grave the world still cannot find. But the system he created continued without him. His sons and grandsons carried Mongol power farther, linking distant courts, markets, and cultures across much of Eurasia. Genghis Khan spent his life conquering a world he would never live long enough to see fully connected. His empire brought destruction on a scale that many societies would never forget. But it also opened routes through which distant civilizations encountered one another more directly than before. That is the deepest paradox of his legacy. People remember the worlds he destroyed, but the empire he began also brought distant worlds closer together. His story reminds us that history rarely fits inside a simple judgment. The same system can create order for some people while bringing loss to others. The same road can carry knowledge in one direction and danger in another. And that lesson still matters today. Strength alone is never enough. What matters is how we use it, what kind of connections we build, and what consequences remain after our decisions are made. Before choosing a path, we should ask who may benefit, who may be harmed, and what might continue long after the moment has passed. Do you think Genghis Khans should be remembered more for destruction or for connection? Please share your opinion in the comments so everyone can learn from different points of view. And subscribe to English Mindwave to support the channel and help us continue creating more meaningful stories from history.